Welcome boys and girls, Costin here with my campaign analysis of Malakai Makaisson's campaign in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. This is one of the best, if not the best campaign that Creative Assembly has ever designed for any Total War game. It is also a very popular campaign at the moment, and for good reason. You have a fun unit roster, you have a fun legendary lord, who's embodying the adventures of Gotrek and Felix from the Warhammer lore. And Gotrek and Felix are very, very popular. But the actual mechanics of the campaign are also amazing. It is a campaign that works exceptionally well within the context of the dwarf rework that Creative Assembly introduced with Thrones of Decay. But I'm not gonna go over that, but suffice to say, however, between the Age of Reckoning, the guaranteed confederation of other dwarf legendary lords, the climate that you actually have, things like Frozen, Wasteland, and Mountain, giving you a huge amount of territory to work with. Malakai is one of the best legendary lords of the dwarves just purely because he does have a good amount of flexibility on how he approaches his campaign on a climate situation, on a grudge level, and in terms of the variety of foes he deals with, because he starts close to Archaon. With Omens of Discretion, you now have Arbol, you have the Norskins, you have Azazel, you have Kislev, you have Skaven. So it is a complicated situation. And this is what makes this campaign really fun from my point of view, and really good, is how do you tackle this wide variety of challenges that you do have in this campaign. From my perspective, I think rushing Hellpit, and yes, marching on Hellpit directly, is probably your best bet. Not necessarily with an army like this. You may want to get more troops. You can, I should add. I could have gotten some miners over here in this army, regardless of that. Still, you may want to wipe out Hellpit and deal with Azazel, deal with Trog. But you do have a bunch of choices and very different ways on how you approach this campaign from the very beginning. And the experience on that level never ends. This campaign is all about dealing with different scenarios and different choices. Because you do start with this early game situation where you do have a huge amount of foes surrounding you, and how you deal with those foes is going to define your campaign. This is a campaign you can easily fail if you fuck it up. Because you can end up being overrun by Archaon and Arbol. Like, if you let Boris Ursus be destroyed, for instance, guess who Archaon is going to come for? As well as the Demon Prince, Epidemius. It ends up being something of a nightmare in a lot of ways. So that's the beginning portion of it. But later on, when you start thinking about dealing with legendary grudges and confederating legendary lords of dwarves, you further have that diversity in terms of how a campaign is played. And that is amazing. Now, the key design feature for this campaign is obviously to do with Malakai's adventure. Early on, until you complete one of these adventure battles, you will only be able to go for either cannons or gyrocopters. But then later on, you get Goblin Hewers, you get gyro bombers, you get flame cannons. You have a bunch of objectives over here for these kind of units. And it might seem like it's forcing you to do certain things, but in reality, most of these objectives are just like, go fight using these units. Certainly, there are some objectives, fight in a certain climate or against certain enemies, but you can absolutely complete these objectives by just literally getting these units. And you get these units for free, a limited roster of them. You get these units as quote-unquote mercenaries, they call it over here, but you do get some of these units for free. So you get cannons, you get thunder barges, you get gyrocopters, gyro bombers, organ guns, just a huge level of power, and you make them even more powerful. It is really fun, because you end up with cannons that have grape shot ammunition for them, as an example. You look at gyrocopters, They end up getting a good amount of experience, missile strength, and missile block chance, which is pretty damn substantial in its own right. So there's a good level of power that is available over here through these objectives. And while some of them can be a bit tedious, they are also, for the most part, like you do have those quest battles, which are more interesting in some ways than many regular battles you might encounter in a campaign, and certainly spice things up as well. You do have even some story dilemmas. Like, for instance, here I had a dilemma to deal with dwarven refugees, and I chose to go with plus 30 growth. Could have gotten a construction cost benefit, could have gotten some military units if I wanted to, but I went for that growth. So some dilemmas do exist on that level. You're also one of the few campaigns in the game, outside of course, like Kislev and Empire, but outside of those, you're actually the only campaign that can get access to Ulrika. You do need to get the shooting gallery, and you will be able to get access to Ulrika. It makes sense because of the relationship between her as well as Gotrek and Felix. So, pretty fun campaign from that perspective. Can be really brutal though, considering the number of foes you are dealing with though. In terms of Malakai himself, he's really crazy with war machines. Now, it's interesting to think about the fact like the Spirit of Grungni has absolutely a Slayer focus on it. Like if you look at the core structure, like you get all Slayer unit recruitment, so Slayers, Slayer Pirates, Giant Slayers, Doomseekers, as well as Dragon Slayers. But in reality with Malakai, you don't really want to use them with Slayers. In fact, I would dare say like actually recruiting Slayers in this campaign. Of course, Demon Slayers and Dragon Slayers are a bit different, but I'm talking about the actual Slayer units. Unless you're getting Gargrim Iron Fist, there's almost no reason to recruit Slayers considering the benefits that you get otherwise. I mean, you can, there's nothing stopping you, but the real benefit here is absolutely war machines. So you get the ranged munitions, you get missile strength for war machines, that is the focus. You get engineer recruitment in all provinces, and that's pretty damn crazy. You do get, as I said, like, you get some Slayer benefits, but then you get, like, reload time reduction, casualty replenishment, construction time for military support buildings, all provinces construction cost for Slayer buildings, and, you know, the range munitions upgraded. So you could, as I said, like, you could absolutely. Like, military support is everything that you see over here. So being able to build this stuff faster will allow you access to the stuff that's at the top easier. Personally, I've never used the Thunder Barge, well, besides the ones you get for free in Malakai's campaign. I've never gotten to the point of really recruiting a Thunder Barge because, you know, getting tier 5 takes a while, etc. And actually with the dwarves, like, unless you deliberately focus on growth, and even if you do, it is just going to take that time, but there's kind of no point in it. Like, the gyro bombers, like, getting to tier 4 absolutely is, but pushing tier 5 quickly, like, considering how hero capacity works and recruitment works and buildings and all that, there's not really necessarily that much reason as far as I see it on that subject. And I've played campaigns for the dwarves, like, spanning 70, 80 turns and never recruited a Thunder Barge. And I'm not talking here a couple of campaigns, like over 10% of my total playtime in Warhammer for free, which is thousands of hours, just to give you an idea of my total playtime. But like hundreds of hours I've spent playing the dwarves post Thrones of Decay. Kind of gives you an idea when people complain about something being overpowered, then it's like, yeah, I'm sure if you play a campaign of, 100 turns, you're overpowered. That applies to any legendary lord, any race. Like, yeah, you steamroll the map at that point. It's the journey over there that is relevant, as far as I see it. Like, and with Malakai's journey, like, it is a crazy journey. Like, you start over here with Azazel and Hell Pit. That should be your early objective. Then you go into Norska, you have that entire grudge with Norska. Then you might just want to hop on over here to the Castways, largely to do the organ gun adventure. But then you're also contending with the fact that if you ignore Boris Ursus, and you shouldn't, but if you ignore Boris Ursus, then Archeon and Arbol are just going to start obliterating you, are just going to obliterate him, and then they're going to come after you. And you can deal with them, but if your armies are busily dealing with the northern Castways, then, well, let's just say that it is inconvenient. So it is in your interest to ensure that Boris Ursus survives. So you gotta consider those kind of dilemmas in a campaign. It sounds a lot easier than it is, because you may also want to pay a visit to the Empire for the Flame Cannon objective. You may want to go into the Darklands. There's other reasons as well, like for instance dealing with the Silver Pinnacle, Legendary Grudge, and sealing the tombs over here to deal with the vampires and getting the significant benefits. Like, that is a pretty sizable income benefit. And yeah, you look at a situation that you do have right here. In general, in a dwarf campaign, you will have dilemmas that you don't see for any other race in the game, but I think like Malakai just takes that to not even 11, but to 1,000. Or over 9,000 in the ridiculousness. Because you don't just have the Age of Reckoning. You don't just have the Legendary Grudges. You don't just have Guaranteed Confederation. You also have the adventures to contend with, combined with the tricky starting position. Like, if Malakai was in a safe starting position, I think his campaign would have suffered immensely for it. But he's not. CA knew what the heck they were doing with regards to this. I do feel like some of the cool stuff takes a bit too long to unlock, but there's a reason mods exist, right? If you just want to get growth very quickly, there's a reason mods exist on that campaign customization. I do feel some of that, like unlike say, another great campaign is Arbol, of course. So what I like about Arbol's campaign is like you can access a lot of things a lot quicker. From my point of view, like you can get Minotaurs and Slaughter Brutes at tier 3. The only annoyance in Arbol's campaign is actually getting access to skull cannons. With Malakai, it's a bit more complicated than that. I also don't like the speed at which the Spirit of Grungni. But these are, the speed at which Spirit of Grungni upgrades. But these are minor, insignificant affairs compared to the mountain of issues many other campaigns do have in Warhammer 3. So it's a really good campaign. It is a campaign I recommend. There's, outside of, just dealing with Azazel and Fraud, there's no necessarily set path. And honestly, you could even ignore Azazel and Fraud. Like, you could just go rush Trong if you wanted to, because you might just rely on Kislev to wipe out Hellpit. And believe it or not, in a lot of campaigns I do play, they actually do manage to wipe out Fraud without any involvement of Malakai. There was one thing I wish Creative Assembly would change about this campaign and about this Legendary Lord, is how the AI uses Malakai, because I feel like Malakai under AI control is a far cry from the sheer level of bullshit that he can do when you are playing him. And I think, if you're playing a campaign in this area, if you're playing Azazel, Archeon, or Arbol, it would kind of be a bit more interesting to have a genuine challenge as opposed to the passive action that Malakai is under the hands of the AI. If you're playing Norska, why are you playing Norska? That's all I can say on that. In terms of units you should focus on, I would definitely say both cannons and gyrocopters are absolutely worth it. I would also argue gyro bombers are a very significant unit, and of course organ guns. Goblin hewers and flame cannons, not really as important from my point of view. However, it is worth pointing out that getting the gyro bomber upgrades is a journey and a half, suffice to say. It does take a while. And even the gyrocopters, the cannons are kind of the one you're naturally inclined to do, because the objectives there's some elven army spawning over here for you to deal with in Norska, as an example. There's a dilemma over here, so I think the cannon is the one that you naturally should go for, whereas the gyrocopters do require you to go into the Darklands to properly deal with them. It's also that aspect about this campaign, like you have objectives all over the board, so you might just end up overextending yourself trying to complete those as quickly as possible. Anyway, that's all I had to say. Costin signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications. If you're playing this campaign, my recommendation is like, yeah, you can make an army of Iron Drakes, Thunderers, but like the real winner over here clearly are gyrocopters. Like, it's kind of hilarious actually with that situation. Like when you start playing with, like when I started playing this campaign, or this campaign came out, a lot of people are like, oh, cannons are really overpowered, and then it's like, no. Gyrocopters ended up being ridiculously broken in multiple ways in Dwarven campaigns. CA has nerfed them to some extent, but they're still ridiculously powerful. Because the game is not designed to counter range flying units. Or, yeah, it never was. You gotta understand, like, Sisters of Twilight were ridiculous with their freaking, and still are ridiculous with their cruise missiles on Hawk Riders. But that was kind of a one-time thing, whereas every Dwarf Legendary Lord can really make use of gyrocopters. Malakai just is more ridiculous with them. That's all.